Take a look at the fennec foxes as they were playing with their enrichment items, and they were just being super bloody cute. Welcome to Planet Zoo, a game where you can create and manage your own zoo. Or if you really want to, create death battles between the animals. Not that we're gonna do that. I spent 25 years building up my zoo, but I had 5 goals I needed to accomplish by the end of these years. These 5 goals were to have a 5-star zoo, 1 albino animal, $100,000 cash, 10 different animal species in the zoo, and at least 1 multi-species habitat. Can I accomplish all of this in 25 years? Let's find out. And if you guys find yourselves enjoying the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe down below for more. Before you make an omelette, you have to break a few eggs. So we started with the Zoo of Suffering. But little did I know I would be the one to suffer. So I started with the basic layout guide that you normally start off with, getting my staff building downs in the process as well, and then I began work on my first exhibit, a meerkat enclosure. So I placed the basic barricade, some rocks around the back end, as well as a hard stuck building to try and make it look like they had a back of house area. And just like that, I had finished my first enclosure. So I got some meerkats, got the meerkats into the enclosure. Little did I know that this would not be enough space for them, and that the way I had designed the enclosure wouldn't actually allow the meerkats to climb up and function as they would as a lookout. So I took a look at the navigatable terrain, and they couldn't actually get on top of the hill or the rock structure that I had designed for them for some reason. I don't really know why. It was really frustrating because these guys do have the ability to climb. I also chucked some burrows in, and my god, do these things look like they're possessed down there. That's terrifying. Thankfully, the public didn't really get to see that side of the meerkats, only I had access to it, so they were just lobbing in donations for these guys. We were making absolute bank on the meerkats. Look at them all just tossing their money in. Unfortunately, however, it didn't work out. I really wasn't a fan of that, so I started again in a brand new zoo once again. And once again, I was the one to suffer. Trying to come up with a exhibit for them, I actually made myself go bankrupt in the process, so we started again with the Zoo of Zoos. Now, this time I actually planned out my zoo a little bit better and got to work at placing it all down. So I started with the pathing system and the staff buildings, setting them up slightly to the left. Down these 2 main areas, these 2 main pathways was going to be the main thoroughfare. The left side being African, the right side being North American. So I got to work by mapping out the terrain of my first exhibit, and this was once again going to be meerkats, because if there's anything we've discovered so far, it's that meerkats make absolute bank and people seem to love them. So I managed to place the first set of barricades down. I linked up some staff pathing into the back of the meerkat enclosure so that we could actually have staff members drop them off and everything like that. Obviously we had them hooked up to the staff areas, and I successfully managed to build my first meerkat enclosure. It wasn't anything fancy, but I had gone bankrupt twice now, and I didn't really want to have a relays of that happening again. So I had my meerkats delivered from the quarantine area into their brand new enclosure, and we're already off to a banging start. A fence bloody post is missing. We have no fence there. They're easily able to just escape whenever they want to, so things are looking really swell for us at the moment already. Thankfully, I did fix that up ASAP, and the meerkats were swiftly delivered into their new habitat. Really wasn't much to look at. They literally just had sand. I felt terrible about it. But hey, they were going to be happy in the long run. That's what mattered, right? And just like that, we had our first pair of meerkats in their new habitat. And with just the basic enrichment items, our zoo already opened, and we had 141 people coming in to look at some meerkats. That was it. Literally just meerkats. There wasn't anything else exciting going on. Even in their exhibit, there wasn't anything exciting. Okay, well, people are here to see our very basic meerkat enclosure. Can they see it okay? I did set it a bit further back, mainly because we're going to stick some stuff here to make it look a little bit nicer. So let's go ahead and beautify the meerkats enclosure first, because it needs to look pretty. And so I got to work on placing various plants, rocks, and just other structures around the meerkat enclosure. Now, obviously, these guys do live out in sort of the savanna-y type areas, so I did want some grasses and some sort of shrubbery placed around the exhibit, but I didn't want to go too overboard. I did also place a tree in here for them as well, just because, why not, right? The plant placing continued. I did place some extra ones around their burrows. We placed some extra stones and rocks. That was our main decoration because we could just place an unlimited amount of these and they wouldn't be bothered by them. It was glorious. So be prepared to face a lot of rocks throughout this video. And finally, I placed the donation bins as well as the information for the guests so that they could learn more about the meerkats. I also went ahead and placed some stones around the back end of the exhibit as I wanted there to be this sort of natural rock wall instead of the glass barriers that we had, because eventually we could slot plants into this as well and make it look a little bit nicer instead of just a glass fence the whole way around. I sorted out the rest of my education and had that set up, and I duplicated the rock wall so that I could move it onto the other side and rotated it around a little bit, and I was pretty happy with how the enclosure was looking right now. I then had my first escaped animal. Thankfully, it was only a meerkat, not something serious like a goddamn grizzly bear. So these guys were pretty easy to capture. Thankfully, I managed to fix the fence problem and get them back into the exhibit so that we didn't really have any issues going forward with that. Now, with the meerkats escaping, I had to reset all my education boards as there weren't technically any animals in the exhibit, but they were in there the entire time. So we reset all of them as well and got the donations rolling back in. Now, so far, we're actually breaking quite a bit of money. We were getting about $6 grand profit so far just from purely meerkats. We had 160 people in our zoo. Honestly, we could just run with meerkats for 25 years and call it a day. We'd make easy money, I reckon. And then decided to start snowing. Now, obviously, when you're trying to set up an African area, you don't really count on there being snow, considering Africa is located in very dry, arid lands. So I had to set some heaters up for the meerkats before they actually froze to death because they are definitely not used to the cold. I mean, at least they're not complaining about the cold, I guess, while this dude's just casually walking around in t-shirt and shorts. You're a brave man, sir. A brave man. So I placed some heaters down into the meerkats enclosure, hiding it behind some ferns, and thankfully it did remove most of the snow in their habitat, but our zoo was just a white wonderland. It looked really odd. You couldn't even see the bloody footpath or the habitat boards for that matter. Thankfully, the snow did start to disappear and I could finally get to work on building my next enclosure. Right next to the meerkats, and once again, another African-based animal, as this was the African part of our zoo. So I mapped everything out by using the terrain tool, flattening everything down. I wanted to keep the same sort of aesthetic as the meerkats, where there was a little sort of gap between the barrier and the footpath, so that I could place some plants down there as well. And we also got our first inspection report. Thankfully, Habitat 2 was a big hit. However, our education really was abysmal. So I didn't really know how else to increase our education. Like, we brought up the overview of it, and I'm guessing you just have to have everything blanketed it in like a thingy of blue for him to be happy, because I just couldn't figure out how to get a lot of education going. But I mean, I was doing what I could. I then begun work on setting up the barrier for the next exhibit, habitat, whatever you want to call it. Enclosure. Let's go enclosure. I'm going to probably be changing this up throughout the entire video, to be completely honest. So I placed the barricades around the area that I wanted this to be set up in. You can see there was a gradual sort of slope that I tried to map into it. Thankfully, placing the barriers down didn't take me too long, and by nighttime I had completed the next barricades for the next enclosure. Now I wanted to build a footpath leading up to the back end of this enclosure so that we could actually view the animals from high above. I also wanted one for the meerkats as well. This took me way too long to try and sort out, to be completely honest. I spent way too much time fiddling with this upwards pathway. I was considering bringing one right across onto the meerkats and then having it hooked down below, but I decided to scrap that and just had it going around the new exhibit. Now you're probably wondering, what is this new exhibit? Well, you're just gonna have to wait and see. Now I did have guests complaining that the zoo ticket price was too cheap, so I bumped it up a little bit and I thought we'd see what we'd get. Considering that I only had meerkats in the zoo, I figured $5 was a pretty decent start. We had 340 people coming into the zoo to see meerkats. Thankfully, people were using the new area, the new pathway that I had built going up and around the other habitats. So I was pretty happy with that as well. It meant that we were going to get people using it when we eventually put animals in this new one. People were still complaining that the zoo ticket prices were under money. So, I mean, I was still making bank. I probably could have increased the amount of money that I was making. But, I mean, I didn't even think about it. I then discovered that we're actually having meerkat babies, and that's why more people were coming into the zoo, because we were getting more animals. More animals meant more people. So I did try to track down some of the meerkat babies, the little tiny beans, and I didn't manage to find them. I then accidentally transferred the new animal into the meerkat enclosure, and this animal is a slight predator, so I wanted to get it out before it decided to eat our meerkats, and that was the fennec fox. So this was the animal going next to the meerkats, not in with the meerkats. Just wanted to clarify that. I'm not running some sort of murdering ring here, I promise. Not going to set our animals onto a death match with each other like Ark. So thankfully I did manage to get the fennec fox separated, and the meerkats came in and had a sleep in their burrow, looking cute as heck. I mean, we've also got more babies. Oh, look at them running. Oh, look at this one drinking the water. It's going to fall in bloody drink. I then realized that I needed to do extra research for these guys to actually unlock extra things. So I then discovered the research tab and remembered about that. So I got my mechanics researching some South American stuff, and I also got our vets researching the fennec fox. It was then time to transfer them into their new habitat next to the meerkats. Now, obviously, it wasn't really much to look at, but I like chucking the animals in first and then designing around the animals so that we know what their terrain requirements are, their habitat, their enrichment items and stuff like that. So I did place the basics such as the feeding tray and a water bowl for them. And here are our two new little cuties. Where are you running? I don't know where you're going to. I should probably make sure that they can't get out. Let's take a look. Alright, so far so good. They definitely cannot get out of the habitat. I then placed down a burrow for them so that they had some hard shelter, and then I got to work at placing the enrichment items down, such as a skittle feeder and a couple of other unique items that they had, such as the sprinkler and the blood scent marker. Now, my meerkat population had kind of gone a little bit crazy. We were getting a ton of babies from the meerkats, so I was thinking we might need to apply some contraception to them. But for the time being, I thought I'd just let them keep breeding because I could always release them for some conservation credits. Now, my fennec foxes were slightly stressed, and I was trying to figure out what the issue was. I think it was the barrier, so I actually switched the barrier to a one-way glass for them so that they would be slightly less stressed out, and that seemed to do the trick. Their stress did start going up, which meant it was going down, if that makes sense. It was very confusing to try and explain. But they were getting happier with the one-way glass, which I was thankful for. Now, I also had the inspector come in once again, and he was happy with the meerkat's habitat, not as happy with the fennec fox habitat, but that was a work in progress. I was somewhat through putting some nature stuff throughout the habitat for them, such as the grasses. Now, this was going to kind of have the same sort of aesthetic vibe as the meerkat's enclosure. Lots of shrubbery, lots of low bushes, lots of grasses, maybe a tree or two, and then lots and lots of rocks. I also started replacing the back wall with a rock wall so that we had that sort of more naturalistic look instead of the barriers. I figured this was going to look great, and I did plan to eventually put some bamboo along the rocks as well, just to kind of blend it in a little bit better and make it look a little bit more greener. So after placing all of the rocks and plants, the fennec fox enclosure was completed. Now, I wanted to build the path connecting up everything, and we're going to have a little bit of an area there to place some plants, and I completed the first lots of research for the fennec fox and our South American theme. Now, I wanted to also expand on the zoo a little bit and try and map out where we were going to go for next stuff. I did want to try and get some food stalls set up in the process as well, because obviously that can make extra money, and we had people complaining that they didn't have any food or water. I spent way too long figuring out where to put the toilets and eventually settled on putting them in front of the staff buildings, and then I got to work at trying to place down some restaurants or fast food services for the guests. Now, I wanted to have like a little promenade area and have it all out of timber and have it like a nice open area. This took me so much longer than it should have. I was really struggling trying to get this to work. So I tried to come up with like a little square promenade area. I just couldn't get the paths to snap properly. I couldn't get the way for it to work properly. So I eventually gave up and just decided to plonk down the restaurants instead. But this took me so much longer than it should have. It also took some time to take a look at the fennec foxes as they were playing with their enrichment items, and they were just being super bloody cute. I then came to the realization that I hadn't even set up any donation bins in front of the fennec fox's habitat. One of the cutest animals didn't have any donation bins. I've missed out on so much profit. I also had brain dead people for some reason coming upstairs to try and check out the fennec foxes. It was a very high platform. Like, the chances of them seeing the fennec foxes, I mean, I couldn't figure out what they were doing up there, to be honest. And like, you could easily have seen them from the front of the exhibit instead of going up there. I don't know. I got no words for these clowns. I then began mapping out the next habitat. Now, this was going to be slightly left to the staff area when I got a notification that our male fennec fox was infertile now. Now, he had provided 2 babies into the fennec fox habitat. He had just become too old, unfortunately, now, so we let him live his remaining life out there when I discovered that my restaurants weren't actually being powered. So that's why all these people were only flocking to one of them. I sorted that out and then begun the pathway up and around the new habitat, enclosure, whatever you want to call it. I had mapped it out slightly with different colored terrain, so you can see there that the dirt was colored slightly different. And I began placing the pathway around the habitat. The rest of the year was just spent halving out the terrain for the new habitat. I also went ahead and decided to manage my fennec fox population, hoping that with the introduction of a new male and a new female that we would get some new offspring and they would be genetically diverse. It was then time to start setting up the hyena habitat. And you know what that means? Lots and lots of rocks. I wanted to use rocks as a natural barrier, so I got to work at setting all of those up. Then I absolutely hated it, so I destroyed all of it. So after failing to establish a perimeter with a rock wall, I then decided to try and make my own fences. Now, these were slightly better than the rock wall, but I still really wasn't vibing with it all that much. I wasn't a fan of it. I didn't like it. I tried adding a concrete pole to it along the base, but it just didn't look very well. So eventually I did manage to come up with a design of fences that I did actually like, and this was pretty fitting, I felt, for the hyena habitat. So I got to work placing that around the entirety of the habitat, which is a hell of a task. This was a big habitat. I then began sculpting the terrain at the back end of the habitat as I wanted people to see them from the walkway. There was also a very questionable design choice from the terrain tool. We gave birth to a nipple. A nipple arrived on the mound. Now, I also placed some rocks around the back end of the habitat as I didn't really want it all to be fences. There'd be really no point to having it fences down the back here. So I wanted it to have that sort of natural looking with the rocks. So we placed a bunch of rocks down here at the back of the habitat. And just like that, the habitat was complete. I was pretty happy with how it turned out. All that remained to do was make way for a habitat gate for our keepers to get through. So I just had to clear some of the fence for that. I then took my time to admire my fennec foxes. After all, they were being very cute in their little burrow, and this was the first time I had seen them in there. It was then time to release the hyenas into their new habitat. Now, obviously, their new habitat wasn't much of a habitat. It was kind of more of a barren wasteland, but we were going to fix that for them. We weren't going to leave them in their poor, shabby confines looking like this. So I took a look at some hard shelter and then eventually decided that I didn't like any of it. So I figured I'd build my own. But before that, I placed a bunch of enrichment items around the exhibit. So at least they would have something to do while I placed all the plants and their hard shelter down. And we were already getting visitors visiting the hyenas, which was pretty impressive considering their bare bones enclosure. Now, I hadn't designed the enclosure to the best, and there were a bunch of escape points for the hyenas, so they decided to escape while we had the inspector visiting the zoo, which is exactly what you want when you're trying to pass an inspection on your zoo. Perfect timing, guys. Thank you very much for that. So I got to work at fixing up the rock wall, placing some more rocks so that they wouldn't be able to escape, because that's generally what happens when you have a dangerous animal in a zoo. You want them not to escape and kill your guests. That generally helps the zoo rep. So after placing all of the rocks, I then decided to test out whether or not to see whether or not the hyenas could escape. So we brought up the overview, and apparently they could still escape. There was still a jump point there that they could escape from, as well as some rocks over here that we didn't cover up enough. So we got to work at fixing those up. Oh no! One of our meerkats has died. Oh, poor little dude, 15 years old. I feel bad for him. Why are you cheering for, Keeper? Oh, poor little guy. So after firing the cheering Keeper and our meerkat dying, I returned back to the hyena enclosure, and we still hadn't fixed everything. He was going to jump over the barricade, so I had to get that fixed ASAP before he could make his way out of the habitat, and I just extended the fence up a little bit and kind of staggered it down so it didn't look as gross, and then we tested it out. Apparently he was already mid-motion, so he escaped, but for some reason the box came in and grabbed him and he was back in his habitat, so I was pretty happy about that. I'll take it. It was then time to beautify the hyena's habitat, so I placed all the different terrain types down, and then I wanted to make some hard shelter for them. Now, I did want to try and make a dome type hard shelter. I, for the life of me, just could not get it. I was trying a bunch of different things. It just was not working. Eventually, I did settle on a bamboo type structure, which I think actually turned out really well. I was really happy and impressed with myself with how this turned out, considering I made it from scratch. Unfortunately, however, another one of our meerkats died and kind of just became one with the habitat and faded into the ground. So I don't know where that meerkat ended up. Now, we also got notified that our meerkats were about to inbreed, and that's a genetic disaster, so we cancelled that as quick as possible and returned back to the hyena habitat, placing all the nature stuff. Now, during this process, we actually had a hyena baby as well, and this dude was adorable. Look at him doing his little dance and then laying down. These guys were so cute. Hyenas have to be probably one of my favorite animals. And with that, the hyena habitat is completed. I feel like it's pretty good. I could probably add some more nature stuff to it in terms of rocks and everything like that, but I feel like this is a solid amount to have, and I feel like doing more would possibly ruin it. You can play with the box. You hear the box. It's kind of not the same thing. Now, I had some people complaining that they couldn't see the hyenas, so I started making these sort of glass window viewing areas that people could use. I used the fence as a frame and just chucked some glass bits in between to help people see into the habitat. And because hyenas didn't really need fence highs all that high, this actually worked out really great. So we've now put these installed around the fence habitat so people can see in as they're walking through. We've got quite a few of them set up, and then obviously we've got the ramp leading upstairs so that they can view down into the habitat. So after the completion of the hyena habitat, I then wanted to spend a bit of time working on the staff facilities. Now, obviously it was just the bare bones building and it looked bloody ugly. So I decided to attach these new world items to it, and I also wanted to build a pathway up the top here, as I had a plan for like a rooftop garden that the staff members could use and use it as like a break area. However, I couldn't get the paths to snap, so I decided to just use it as a garden area instead, just to try and beautify the building. Staff members could still walk up here and stuff like that, so I figured it was a decent payoff, and it actually turned out pretty good. I did only get this shot at nighttime, unfortunately. But I then returned to the fennec foxes and released some of them back out into the wild before adopting and releasing some more fennec foxes, as our population was getting a little bit too big. This toilet hasn't been cleaned since I put it down. Look at the flies coming out of it. Oh shit, that's funny. Should probably clean that. Let's get that cleaned. Now, I also released Faraji, our hyena, as he was an outsider and he had reached maturation, so there wasn't really too much of a goal or role for him in the pack. So I also spent some time beautifying the back of the meerkat habitat with some bamboo, as well as hiring a bunch of cleaners and just developing the central area of the zoo. It was very bare bones and I wanted to try and make it a little bit prettier. So I made these sort of jungle boxes, I guess you could call them, where they were framed and they had a bunch of plants in them, and they would be down at the main thoroughfare of the zoo. I then went ahead and took a look at all of our meerkats, and holy smokes did we have a lot of meerkats. So I decided to release a bunch of them into the wild, getting myself a decent amount of conservation credits, and then I spent a bit of time also beautifying the front of the meerkat habitat with a bunch of plants as well. Like I mentioned, I did want to leave this space at the front of the exhibits, habitats, whatever you want to call them, so that I could go ahead and do this and make it look a lot nicer. And it also makes it seem and feel a bit more natural when you've got those plants there. Granted, they are green-based plants, but they are African-based plants that you can find in Africa, which is the vibe I was going for. Now, I did want to try and also set up a restaurant area as well for all our guests, and boy, oh boy, was this a pain in the butt. So I decided to try and map it out as best as I could using this cube method, which actually worked pretty good. But then trying to get the restaurants to snap and trying to get everything else to align was just kind of a nightmare. Eventually, however, I did get everything, well, the restaurants anyway, in place. And you can see there, we did have that picnic area off to the left that we would later expand on. I also added a bunch of staff buildings over here on this side, as this was going to be the start of our North American side once we eventually got to it. I then went ahead and spent some time watching our meerkats because they were cute little buggers. Now, the restaurant was in full swing of things, so people were lining up like crazy, which I was happy about. So I decided to also then work on the next animals that we wanted, the aardvarks. So these guys were originally going to go in with the meerkats, as they are a cross-species enrichment for the animals. So I wanted to get those guys in, so we got them quarantined, and then we worked on the picnic area for our restaurant area. placing a bunch of picnic tables, as well as a bunch of nature stuff, bins and everything like that. Now, this was all pathed, so the guests could walk on all of this. And I was pretty happy with how it all turned out. I also placed down a toilet as well. Then I got a notification that dangerous animals were fighting for alpha position. And it turns out that our females had a shift in the alpha position. So that was kind of exciting to see. So we were probably going to separate the females at some point during this because she was getting elderly, so she wasn't obviously doing that great. Now, our shops were absolutely bustling, but I wanted to see what the people thought of everything, and so far the zoo was looking pretty good. I finished this habitat on the right side that I would hopefully get to and link that up to the staff buildings, as this was going to be the next section of our zoo. I also set up the work zones of the new areas, as well as hired a bunch of new staff for this staff area over here, just to help keep the zoo clean and everything like that, and it will also help keep the restaurant area clean as well. Now, unfortunately, our 2 original hyenas did pass away as well, so only their daughter was left, but the aardvarks were ready to go in with the meerkats, so I went ahead and delivered them over to the meerkat enclosure. Little did I know that this would cause me way too much stress than it was worth. There we go. And we've got our aardvarks in here. Look at these little cuties. Terrain is 33. Okay, they're just short space by the looks of it. Aardvarks aren't happy. Might need to send them away, to be honest. I have a feeling this might be a little bit too small for them. I did manage to get their terrain type perfectly aligned with the meerkats. However, they were still super duper stressed. Okay, we've got protesters showing up for Adio and he's slowly getting better. I don't know, we just probably didn't have the 2-way glass, and now we've got the 1-way glass, sorry. So they can't see out, but he's still a little stressed, but it seems to have fixed itself. These guys are just short 1 square meter on their navigable terrain. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to go about doing this. I'm thinking maybe if we move some like rocks out, we could do it like that. Yeah, that might give them like the extra square meter that they need. I don't know. We can try. I'm not sure why he's stressing for. Okay, they have enough terrain. I'm thinking they're trying to hide because they're very shy creatures. So I went ahead and tried to expand the habitat a little bit more for them by removing the rock walls just a bit further back and extending the fence line. You can see here, I also did remove the sort of pathway above the habitat as well. So we had some floating guests for a little bit of time, but that was okay. I also added an extra burrow for them. Alrighty, hopefully this settles everyone down with the aardvarks and they become a little bit less stressed. Otherwise, we're probably going to have to get rid of them, to be honest. Yeah, people aren't too happy about it. I mean, we still get donations. I don't know if you guys just saw that. Someone just lobbed some cash in there. I'll take it. So unfortunately, I did have to remove the aardvarks and we reverted back just to having the meerkats, which was a shame, but it was best for the aardvarks. Now, I wanted to increase the guests' education, so I went ahead and put all these animal talking points around the habitats because I figured that would hopefully help out the guest education rating. I was just I couldn't figure out how else to raise it, to be honest. It was then time to begin work on the next habitat. Now, this habitat was going to be slightly different to the rest in that it was going to predominantly be a water-based habitat. So this was a huge undertaking, and to get it the way I wanted it and envisioned it took a lot of effort, and it didn't really pan out exactly how I wanted it to, but I was still pretty happy with how it turned out. But you guys will have to wait and see how that turns out. So I had the fence mapped out successfully, and then it was time to sculpt the terrain. Like I mentioned, this was going to be a water-based habitat, so I wanted this area down at the bottom here to be water. However, it wasn't really deep enough, and I didn't think that there would be enough water in there. So I did sculpt it a little bit more and increase the size of it, and then I began placing the fence that I wanted to use for this habitat down, which is kind of these stone blocks, which I think looked really cool. So I began to work at placing all of these around the habitat. They took a bloody long time to do. And then came time to work on the pathing. Now, I wanted to have an underwater tunnel. Not necessarily that would go under the water, but that just you could go underground to view the underwater section of it. And trying to get this to work for some reason just broke my brain. Like, I genuinely could not figure out how to get this to bloody work for me. After a lot of testing and figuring out where to place the path and stuff like that, I did eventually manage to get a path down to the underground area. The only problem was it looked really, really gross and ugly because of the terrain. And once you place your path, you can't actually edit the terrain around the path, which makes it really annoying. So I also got these weird divots throughout the path, which kind of sucked because it took away from it. It didn't look all that great. So I did try to place the glass barriers as well down while I was here, because I think that would also help us figure out where we could place the path and how we can have our water. So eventually I did manage to get it work, but it took so long fiddling with this. It just took so much time to get it to work how I wanted it to. Thankfully, my design process did plan out and we weren't having any water leaking through the habitat walls, which was great. So I finished placing the fence around the rest of the habitat. So with the habitat fence built, I then decided to chuck in some water to see how that would look throughout the habitat. And I was pretty happy with how the water was looking now that I had changed the terrain. It was then time to get our animals. Now for this habitat, we were going to have red river hogs as well as pygmy hippos. Now I did also kind of want to try putting hippos in this habitat, but I wasn't sure that there would be enough space. I then went back to my meerkats once again to watch them as one was about to turn into an adult. Look at that. What a cutie. I just love these guys. I can see why they were making us so much money. It was then time to release our new animals into the habitat, the red river hog and the pygmy hippo. But of course I decided to release them in the middle of the night when the light's not very good. Oh my god, look at him swimming! Slightly drowning, I believe. It's so cute. Oh my god, my heart. Look at the pygmy hippo behind him. It does look like it because we have set up an underwater viewing area for them just here. Oh, that's cool. That is very cool. So I then wanted to try it out with hippos and see if we could have hippos in the habitat. I also fixed up the work zone so that our staff members would be slightly more relaxed while going through it, and I also hired some more staff. I do love seeing the red river hogs going for a swim, I'm not gonna lie. They're cute as heck. Oh my god, look at the big chunguses. Oh. Oh, you guys. Okay, let's take a look here. Traversable area. It doesn't say they can go in the water. I'm hoping they can go in the water. They better be able to go in the water. Defeats the purpose if they don't go swimming. So the hippos were going to need a lot of space, much more than what this current habitat provided with them. Even though the water wasn't fully accessible to them, which I did try to sort out as well, they still just did not have enough space. So these guys were just way too big for this habitat. I did fix the terrain for them so that they could go down to the bottom of the sort of watery area, but they were just still way too big. And they were leaving colossus-sized poos everywhere they walked. So I decided to remove the hippos from the habitat and decided to just run with the pygmy hippos and the red river hogs in this one. But first, I needed to beautify it just a little bit because it was looking rather bland. Alrighty, so we've got some extra... Oh, look at these guys interacting with each other. So cute. We've gotten some extra red river hogs and some pygmy hippos so that we can stick them in here. Obviously, we've already got protesters arriving as well. I don't know if... Are you guys still protesting up here? And look at the pygmy hippo on the bottom of the ocean. He's just walking along, minding his own business. There's two of them down here. Oh, these guys are cute as. Obviously, hippos would be much cooler, but I mean, we don't have two hippos. There's not enough space. We've got people down there as well. That's cool. That's really cool. Oh, there's a baby red river hog. It's so cute. Look at its little trot. It's gonna eat some fruit. Yo. My heart. I can't take it. It's too damn cute. So, I mean, I'm still working on the habitat at the moment. I think I've got most of the trees in for the time being. Look at everyone up here. I'm glad I put this boardwalk up here. Alrighty, and I think that is our red river hog and pygmy hippo enclosure done. I'm pretty happy with how this looks, I think. So, we've got quite a lot of plants. We've got some rocks going on. We've got lots of enrichment, lots of baby pygmy hippos going around. Look at this little cutie. Lots of, oh my god, I might need to put the pygmy hippos on the red river hogs on some form of contraception because there is a lot of babies running around. There is a lot. I might need to put some contraception up. Let's just assess what we've got going on here with the animal list because this might be a little bit too much. So we've got our hippos there. Yep. Where are our red river hogs? Can I upgrade their food quality? No, I got to research them. Red river hogs. Here we go. We have 7 animals. No. We have 7 females and 5 males. That is a lot of red river hogs. Alright, so we've got 3 years now. What I might do is, I've obviously got to set up the conservation stuff for these guys. Got to get some bins going so we can get some money. We've got money coming in heaps at the moment. Everyone's pretty happy with how everything is. Obviously, the education is massively low. So we need to get something like that up and running. And what I'm going to do as well is I think I might put a little bit more of a food area just out here as well for all of these guys. I'm glad to see these boardwalks are working, so we're going to go ahead, tidy everything up, see if we can get some things nice and tidied. I don't know if I'll do another exhibit. I then went ahead and added all of the education things in the donation box for all the guests around the habitat, and our pygmy hippos were breeding for the first time. So hopefully we would get some offspring from them, because these chunguses are very cute little chunguses and I really like them. So I was hoping for more offspring from them. I then went ahead and spent some time with my fennec foxes, as these guys are little cuties and I don't think we spent enough time with them throughout the 25 years. Now, as well, during this time, I had also unlocked a bunch of research for the fennec foxes. So I actually went ahead and added a bunch of new enrichment items for these little dudes, mainly hollow logs that these guys could run through and plane. And I just love these guys. They're so damn cute. So freaking cute. Now I wanted to refine some more things around the zoo as well, so I added these lampposts so that way they could see during the night. I added some more conservation boards. I also fancied up the area near the toilets, adding a bunch of plants to it, as well as integrating the toilet a little bit more into the nature scene, and added some more of those conservation boards, as that would increase the guests' education, and for some reason that was just absolutely abysmally low. So I wanted to try and increase that as much as possible, and then it decided to bloody snow again. Everything was covered in snow. I did install some heaters in the various habitats that needed them. The hyenas, the pygmy hippos. Obviously, these guys are African-based animals, so they definitely needed the heaters. I also increased the thoroughfare by adding extra planter boxes and some seating, as well as more of those conservation boards. Now, I also wanted to have an exhibit section of the zoo, so I found this cave design that I really liked, but I did alter it a little bit to fit my needs. So we removed this pathway, and then from the back of that, I could add a walk-through exhibit. But before we could do that, our hippos were once again getting jiggy with it, so I decided to watch that because it's not seedy of me or anything like that. Nothing happened, I promise, but we were slowly getting more and more pygmy hippos. Back to the walkthrough exhibit, I then bought a bunch of animals such as the Goliath beetle, the Goliath frog, the puff adder, as well as the giant tiger land snail, and added those all to the exhibit, as well as the Egyptian fruit bats, which were also part of the walkthrough exhibit. I placed some extra staff buildings down to deal with the exhibit side of the zoo, and I connected the walkthrough exhibit to the cave section of the smaller exhibits. Now, I didn't really have too much time to be able to add a whole heap of stuff that I wanted to. We were coming up to the end of the 25 years, so unfortunately I didn't get to do everything I wanted to. Alrighty guys, it is coming up on the end of our 25 years in Planet Zoo, just like that. Woo, we've hit the new year. So, let's go over the zoo real quick and take a look at what we've accomplished in this 25 years. It's a slog, I'll tell you that much, but I'm pretty impressed with what I've done considering it's been a very long time since I played Planet Zoo. So, coming into the zoo, we've got a nice open area. We've got the trees that I'm probably going to run down this whole promenade, to be completely honest. On the left side, I did want to do an African-themed style, and then on the right side was actually going to be North America. So if you guys want to see that, let me know down below and we'll go for 50 years. So our first exhibit are the meerkats, which honestly I was pretty impressed with how we managed to get this built up. Considering it was our first exhibit that we had built, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. We did have the two-way glass, which I might actually change for the aardvarks, because they were getting super stressed out. But, I mean, now that we don't have the aardvarks anymore, we could just kind of change the entire thing back to normal glass, which is taking... It's a process. We'll figure it out. So, I mean, people can see them pretty well. I would have liked... I mean, obviously the two-way glass, one-way glass ain't the best. But these guys are doing great. There's a little bit of genetic stuff that we've got going on that I need to sort of sort out. Thankfully, there's been no inbreeding, so I'm pretty happy with how their enclosure looks. I think it's plenty of space. I also like the front of their enclosure, how we've dotted the plants and everything all along the area as well. Got lights down the main promenade. Probably, yeah, run these. I like these little things that I built. And then we come across here. We can go upstairs. You can view the fennec fox enclosure from above or from below. Why is this not... one-way glass. That's one-way glass. Just ignore me. I've got the one-way glass on the wrong side for the meerkats. It's supposed to be so that the people can see and not the... Oh, I'm dumb. Never mind, let's just ignore that. Fenny foxes, they're doing great. We've got quite a few of these guys in here as well. I would have liked to have come back to their habitat and changed a bit of this around as well for them, because I feel like they would have really enjoyed like an enclosed sort of space. So it's a bit of a shame that I didn't get time to come back down here and do that, but you can come around here. We've got the upstairs area to view the pygmy hippos as well as the red river hogs. This is probably my favorite enclosure out of all of them, just because it's multi-species, and I think that's just a lot of fun, and it's a really nice exhibit. The red river hogs like to swim a lot. They can swim down to the bottom. Well, they don't swim down to the bottom, but they can swim along. The pygmy hippos can come down here. We've got the underwater viewing gallery. So I'm really happy with how this turned out for the red river hogs and the pygmy hippos. The red river hogs are absolutely thriving in here. They've got so many offspring. Look at all the little babies running around. So I'm really happy with how, look at them all. Really happy with how this has turned out. There's plenty of land area for them to get around and everything like that. They can swim if they want to. So I really like the red river hog and the pygmy hippo exhibit. We've got over here the staff buildings with a nice little garden top area up there. We've got the toilets, I should say. Probably change that to a bigger toilet, to be completely honest, because we've got 1,600 people in the zoo. There's a lot of people. And then we've got our hyena. Oh, just in time for the alpha fighting. Got the hyena enclosure here. You're brave, sir. We'll see if the dominance is going to change. So, yeah, I'm a fan of the hyena exhibit too. I really like our zoo, how it's turned out. So, oh, look at the wounds. Oh, she lost. Yeah, I really like our zoo, to be honest. It's really nice. We're going to request a vet. She's limping, the poor thing. So, it looks like the hierarchy has changed here. So, yeah, we've got the exhibit. You can go along. You've got glass viewing points all along. You can kind of see through the fence. I do like the glass viewing points. I think us putting those in was going to make a big difference. Although I could have probably implemented it a little bit better, but still. And then you can come upstairs here, which not many people seem to use. And you can view them from above if they're up here. So, yeah. And then you make your way along here. You've got the underwater viewing gallery to the hippos down there. And then you can come across here, which I'm honestly probably going to put another exhibit here. Something small. Not too sure what just yet, but there's enough space for something else to go there. And then you've got the cave. So inside the cave, we have some exhibit animals. We've got the Goliath frogs. Where are they? Where are the Goliath frogs? Can't see him. There he is in the water at the back there. So we've got the Goliath frogs there. We've got some Goliath beetles here. There's one just there. These guys are tiny. There's one also there. I wonder how many you can fit in there. And then over here, we've got the giant tiger land snails just there as well. You can see those guys. Obviously, their thingy isn't the greatest because we haven't researched it all that much. So we can get that in sorted. And then over here, we've got the puff adder, which is just there. So that's pretty cool. And then after you get through the exhibits, you then come through into the flying fox, Egyptian fruit bat habitat, the walkthrough exhibit. So this I want to obviously tidy up and make a little bit nicer for the bats because it's very basic at the moment. But yeah, that I just ran out of time. I didn't have enough time to get it all sorted. But that is our zoo, and then this comes back out and leads you back down there. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. I would like to do it 50 years if you guys are keen on seeing that and focusing on sort of North America and tidying all this up a little bit. But I think this has gone really well. So that's going to wrap up this video for you guys today. Let me know what you think. Let me know whether or not you'd like to see a 50 years. But other than that, guys, thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one.